defender.
The public defender is a public servant employed by the community and responsible for giving legal aid without cost to any person who seeks it and is financially unable to employ private counsel. It is his duty to defend those accused of crime until they are proven guilty in a court of law. When tragedy strikes, it often leaves a scar of bitterness. Now, the case involving State Highway Patrolman Don Nelson was no exception. Nelson and his partner Jack Miller were patrolling a lonely section of highway when they came upon a construction barricade, its warning light blown out by the wind.
Good thing we got this.
Yeah.
Got a match?
No, I'll get one out of the car.
Well, make it snappy, will you? We get off duty in an hour, and I've got a date for a game of handball.
The guys that were 5 years old here since you get beat.
Let's just get the match, will you, wise guy?
Meanwhile, just a few hundred yards from the barricade, a car approached. It carried two newlyweds.
2 weeks. Not a very long honeymoon.
2 weeks. Then Mr. Private First Class Tony Fraser is off to Japan. Probably never see him again.
They don't make oceans that big. I'll see him again.
You bet you will. Until you're sick of seeing him.
Want to bet?
Come on, Jack!
Honey, are you all right?
She hurt?
I don't know.
I'll call for your ambulance.
Wait a minute, officer. It's not what you think.
Patrol Unit C, 52J calling.
Come in, C52J.
Reporting an accident with a private vehicle on 94, 7 miles south of Riceman Junction. Need an ambulance. Making an arrest on a 501.
Violation of Vehicle Code 501. Accident while driving under the influence of alcohol involving injury. Suddenly, a honeymoon had turned into a nightmare.
That highway patrolman. Is he better?
He died an hour ago. You must pull yourself together, Mrs. Fraser. We have a lot of work to do.
The man's dead. I killed him. Don't I deserve whatever happens to me?
Then you were driving under the influence of alcohol.
What?
Don't you understand the charge that's been brought against you? The patrolman who witnessed the accident says that you were drunk.
But that isn't true. I don't drink. I never have.
His report states there was a strong odor of alcohol in the car. There was a bottle that had
The
been...
brandy. It must have been broken in the crash. But we hadn't been drinking it.
What were you doing with it?
It was a present from Maggie.
And who's Maggie?
She's my grandmother. I've lived with her since my parents died. She has a great vineyard in the Shoshone Valley. Tony and I had just been married there.
Now you listen to me, John Scott. I've been taking what's jokingly called your newspaper for the last 40 years, and I don't want any buts. I want Janet's wedding picture on the front page. Well, just for today, I can't worry about the international situation. Use the profile shot. Now, find over. I want to talk to Janet before she goes. Goodbye, goodbye. Well.
Maggie, the wedding was the greatest.
So is the girl you married. You're much too good for him, darling.
Nothing you can do about it now.
I can make a man out of you, and I intend to as soon as the Army lets you go. Tending these vineyards for a year will put some muscles under those shirt sleeves.
Well, we'd better go. We've got a 200-mile drive ahead of us.
Oh, after that drive from camp, another 200 miles sounds like 2,000.
Just like I say, get out of the Army and I'll make a man out of you.
Goodbye, darling.
Goodbye.
See you in 2 weeks.
Oh, wait a minute. I have something for you. This brandy was bottled almost 100 years ago. My grandfather gave it to my mother as a wedding gift. He had made it from the first fruit on his land after he came to America. It's been handed down to each bride in the family. Your mother had it last. Now it's yours.
You know what, Maggie? You're a pretty nice egg at that. Go on.
My mother saying that brandy was supposed to remind us that life is like the land. You only get out of it what you put in it. For the others, it represented life, but it'll always remind me of death. Mr. Matthews, I'm all Maggie has. You've got to promise me that you won't tell her anything about this.
If that's the way you want it, Janet. Janet Fraser had been convincing, but that wasn't anything a lawyer could carry before a jury. Proof of her innocence was needed. The first person I wanted to see was Janet's husband, Tony. I located him at the Army Embarkation Center, where he was required to report daily. Then there definitely had been no drinking the day of the wedding.
No, sir. Mr. Matthews, I've known Janet all my life. I even went to grammar school with her. I remember when I used to dip her pigtails into the inkwell. She's never done anything bad in her life. What happened wasn't her fault.
All right, Tony. Then we'll keep on trying to find out what did happen.
Well, what do you intend to do?
First of all, I'd like to talk to the highway patrolman who was there when the accident occurred.
I only wish there was some way we could make him understand that it wasn't Janet's fault. He seems to hate her so.
Maybe that's natural, Tony. You see, the patrolman who was killed was his best friend. Come in. Are you Nelson?
That's right.
I'm Bart Matthews. I'm the public defender. I'd like to talk to you about Janet Fraser. Going on a trip?
Just packing Miller's things, sending him to his mother.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Why be sorry? Jack's been thinking he was going to get it ever since we were digging slit trenches overseas. You know, it's funny. Where we were, lead was flying like hail, but it took some boozed-up dame to drop him.
There are two sides to the case, Nelson.
Sure, yours and your law books looking for loopholes, and Jack's just buried.
You two were very close friends, weren't you?
When I say yes, you'll say I know how you feel. That'll make everything just dandy.
Now, just a minute, Nelson. Let's understand one another. I came over here to talk about my client. That's no reason for you to boil over on me.
There's every reason. You're trying to get her off, aren't you?
Only if she's innocent. That's my job.
Then bow out, mister. Because I'm the guy that was there, remember?
Yes, I know. I also know you have a tremendous responsibility in this case.
What do you mean by that?
You were the only witness. You were the arresting officer. The court will go along with your testimony.
You know what that does to your client, don't you?
How can you be so sure about this girl? You didn't even give her a sobriety test.
Well, excuse me for neglecting that, but a certain guy I know is dying in my arms. Look, Matthews, let's get one thing straight. You're not going to get any help from me. I'm on the other side, remember?
I've been reading up on you, Nelson. You're a good police officer. You got a record anyone would be proud of.
You know how I got that record? By calling a spade a spade. No favors, no sentiment, just doing the job I'm paid to do.
You did a little more than that.
Look, I know what you're getting at. Your client's young and she's a bride. I also know Jack Miller's dead.
What I was getting at was a thing called justice. But in your frame of mind, you wouldn't understand. Look, Nelson, I don't know whether you realize it or not, but we're on the same side. I just hope it gets through to you before it's too late. Faced with such damaging testimony from the arresting officer, Janet Fraser's only chance was that some evidence could be produced to confirm her denial that she had been drinking. I didn't find it at the scene of the accident, but I was able to persuade Officer Nelson before he went on duty to meet me at the garage where Mrs. Fraser's car had been impounded.
This is it. Now, just like the police said, that warning light was burning all right. I seen it when I picked up the wreck.
And it's your contention that Janet Fraser should have seen the barricade and the patrolman?
I don't think she could see nothing. I think she was blind, stinko, blotto.
What makes you so sure?
Well, when I come up to haul this heap away, the smell was so strong I nearly got a toot on. Yeah, just passing by.
Well, there was supposed to have been a bottle of brandy in the car that was broken in the wreck.
There was. It's all on the report.
And is it your theory they were drinking from this bottle?
Could be.
This bottle has never been opened. The seal hasn't been broken.
So what? That could have been a spare.
You know, I've been picking these messes up off the highways for, 15 years now. And every time I run into one of them boozers, the first thing he tells the cops is he's just taking this stuff somewheres. Yeah. Nobody ever drinks it. No, he just carries it to somebody else.
That's right. They could have killed 3 bottles before the accident and thrown the empties out the window. Or stopped at any bar along the highway.
Hey, then I got a flash for you. Here. I found these on the floor when I picked the car up. That joint's just 3 miles from where they plowed that there cop under.
I have a day off on the 22nd. If I can be of any more help.
I wanted to question Janet Fraser about the Blue Star Bar, but I was informed she was under sedation. Then I received a visitor and a big surprise. Hello, Tilly.
I just came from the jail. Janet's sick.
She'll be all right.
She'll never be all right until she's cleared of this. She's that kind of a girl.
We're doing the best we can.
Well, you can stop trying. The case is over. I killed that cop.
What are you talking about?
I thought Janet could get away with it. You know, young bride and all that. But it looks like I was wrong. I was driving the car. Pretty drunk, too. After it happened, Janet slid me over and got behind the wheel herself.
Then you two had been drinking.
I'd been drinking. All during the wedding party.
But Janet said there had been no drinking at her grandmother's.
Maggie's getting old. I was hitting the bottle, and she and Janet didn't know about it.
Then you stopped at the Blue Star Bar.
Yeah. I had a few more there. Like they say, the best drinks in the state.
Do you realize that you can receive up to 10 years in the penitentiary for such a crime?
I wasn't expecting a medal. Well, aren't you going to call the cops and have them take me in so Janet can be released?
If the police want you, they'll be after you soon enough. Janet had asked me not to tell her grandmother what had happened. But after Tony's confession, there was no alternative.
But, Mr. Matthews, Janet is the kindest-hearted person that ever lived. It must have been an accident.
There's no doubt about that. It's just that she had the accident while she was intoxicated.
It's a lie. I'd skin them both alive, and they know it.
According to Tony, it's not a lie. He's trying to take the blame, claims that he was drinking during the wedding party.
Tony drinking, and I not know it? Huh. Come with me a moment. Look at all that, Mr. Matthews. Just look at all that. The grapes are a legend in our family. My husband's father brought the first little vines into this valley from Europe. There isn't a grape grown that I don't know the smell of, whether it's fresh or fermented. Not only can I tell when a man has been drinking, but what as well.
You know, I believe you could. Here's a copy of the accident report. I'm sure you'd like to look it over.
You know, when a person has lived 75 years, they learn a lot about people. I think I know how this patrolman must feel. I'd like to talk to him.
I wish you would. I'll try and arrange it.
Thank you.
Well, goodbye, Mrs. DiMagori.
Just call me Maggie.
Maggie DiMagori was obviously a woman of honesty and integrity, and I was sure she wasn't lying. But there was still the Blue Star Bar.
Yeah, I remember those kids. Two real characters.
What makes you say that?
Well, what's more of a character than a newlywed?
Did they buy any drinks here?
That's what nearly knocked me over. They walked in here with this jug, like as if my liquor wasn't good enough.
Could you estimate how much they had to drink?
Oh, I'd say about a couple of cartons.
2 cartons?
Yeah, they ordered milk. Screwy-like. Then they poured the milk into the mugs and sat over there toasting the bottle. Never even opened it. Like I'm telling you, never met such screwy characters.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bolter. And here's a subpoena for the trial.
A subpoena? You mean I've got to go to trial? Well, that's what I get for opening my big fat mouth.
Well, so it shouldn't be a total loss. I'll have something.
Oh, fine. What'll it be?
Glass of milk.
Milk? And it's on the house.
Now it was time to talk to Don Nelson again and hope he would listen to reason.
Now, look, Matthews, I was there and I know what I saw. And you know the courts have a habit of believing the arresting officer.
You call yourself a police officer? You don't want justice. You're looking for a patsy.
Now, wait a minute.
Now, you wait a minute. I know your buddy was a nice guy, and it's a rotten thing that he was killed. But does that give you the right to play judge and jury and decide who's responsible?
I'm going by the book of rules, and you know it.
Then play it right down the line.
Meaning what?
Go back to the scene of the accident and go over everything again with me.
Forget it.
Well, then at least talk to all the witnesses.
What do you mean, all the witnesses? I was the only witness.
There was a witness as to whether or not those 2 kids had been drinking.
What do you mean?
The only place they could have had a drink before the accident was at the girl's grandmother's.
You expect me to believe that girl's grandmother?
She's still a witness to the fact. Well, you're going to follow the book of rules, Nelson? Or are you afraid you might learn the truth?
Get in the car. I'll try it your way.
I have read Officer Nelson's report. I'm afraid that just saying that Tony and Janet were innocent won't be very convincing. I expect you hear a lot of such talk from relatives.
All the time.
I don't suppose it would matter to you if I pointed out that nowhere in here is there any real proof that Tony and Janet had been drinking.
There was a lighted barricade across that road, ma'am. Anyone sober would have seen it.
That's a mighty definite statement.
I'm sorry for you, ma'am, but a man has been killed.
And he was a very good friend of yours. I think I understand.
All you understand, ma'am, is that you've got a granddaughter who's in trouble. Maybe a few years ago, when I first entered the force, I would have been more inclined to listen to you.
What difference do the years make?
They mean I've seen it all, and I mean all of it. Hot rodders racing themselves to an early grave. Reckless drivers trying to see how many they can kill. And the nicest people in the world who get tanked up and try to make a deadly weapon out of their automobile. But no matter how guilty they are, they always have friends and relatives try to set them free so they can do the same thing over again. Ready?
Mr. Nelson, what is going to happen to you on that day after you've ruined a person's life that you find out you've been wrong?
I'm afraid I'm not thinking that far ahead, ma'am. All I know is that Jack Miller is my best friend and he died in my arms. Maybe you can't understand how I feel.
I think I do understand. Will you 2 gentlemen come inside a moment? This is a picture of my husband, taken 43 years ago, the day before he was killed. Maybe murdered, I'm not sure. I met John nearly 50 years ago. I was engaged then to another man, Will Gage. But the moment I met John, I knew that he was the one. It was a good life, until the day Will Gage talked him into that hunting trip. It was right here on this divan where they brought John a few hours later. He died here, with his head in my arms. A hunting accident, Will Gage called it. He cried a lot and said that although he'd never forgotten how John took me away from him, it had been an accident. People around here liked John, and all I had to do was to say that I thought Will was lying, and they'd have strung him up. But I didn't do it, Mr. Nelson. I could have been wrong, just as you could be wrong now, Thank you, Mr. Matthews, for all you've tried to do for Janet. And thank you, Mr. Nelson, for coming to listen to an old woman.
Well, maybe I could be wrong. Goodbye, Mrs. DeMcGorry.
Just call me Maggie.
I had the feeling that Maggie had softened Nelson up, but I wasn't sure. As a last resort, I obtained a court order to take the prisoner to the location of the accident in an effort to arrive at the truth.
I'm sorry, Bart, it's no use. You can see for yourself. Anyone sober would have seen that light.
But I tell you, I know there was no light when I came around that curve.
And I'm telling you, I was standing right here where I am now watching the flames when we heard the car coming.
Now, this is getting us nowhere. Now, let's go over the whole thing once more.
Okay. We were cruising the area, and we noticed the wind had blown the lamp out, so we stopped to light it.
Now, like this.
Now, look around here a little further.
Now, you're sure it was lit before the accident?
I'm positive.
All right, and exactly what happened after that?
We heard the car coming.
Mrs. Fraser, would you mind showing me once more just where you were when you first saw the officer?
Yes, sir. When we came around the curve, they just appeared out of nowhere.
You can see the skid marks.
All right, and what happened after that?
I jumped. Jack didn't have a chance.
Nelson, would you mind getting into your car and driving up to this point in the manner in which you think Mrs. Fraser drove?
Not at all. If you think it'll prove anything.
Did it prove anything?
Proves Mrs. Fraser was right. She couldn't see that light. Nobody could. Miller was blocking it from her view.
Now, being wrong is nothing to be ashamed of. Just as long as you're man enough to admit it.
I'd kind of like to be the first one to tell her, Bart.
Looks like she's already guessed.
No, I mean Mrs. DeMcGorry. Just call me Maggie. I'd like to be the one she hears it from.
You know, my guess is you're the one she'd want to hear it from. Patrolman Nelson filed an amended accident report. The death of Patrolman Jack Miller was declared accidental and Janet Fraser was released. As for Patrolman Don Nelson, he was given a citation of merit for his diligence to duty and seeing that justice was done. Now, the case you have just seen was brought to a fair and just conclusion through the efforts of a public defender.